votes that you've had since you've been in Washington,
A lot
whatever
of
the case may be. Yeah, I'll bet. And then we'll open it up to questions. You can either put your questions in the chat or, just wave your hand in some fashion that maybe I'll see it and call on you. But let's begin by having you take the floor, and it's all about you, Representative Hinson. Go.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for allowing me to come on. It's an honor to serve you in Washington, D.C., and it's an honor to have a cup of coffee with you virtually this morning. I apologize if you hear the thundering horde upstairs. 8:02 is our bus time, so like right now they should be heading out the door to get on the bus, but I'm hearing it a lot down here, so I apologize if you're hearing it over the broadcast. But great to be with you. Just for way of background a little bit, my name's obviously Ashley Hinson. Served as a state representative for 4 years before I decided to run for Congress. And before that, I anchored news for 10 years on KCRG TV9. Before that, I grew up in central Iowa. I was a broadcast journalism major at USC, decided to come back to Iowa because it's where I wanted to work and raise my family. Married a Waterloo guy, my husband, Matt. He works at Elliott Hartman Insurance, if any of you are familiar with that. He works in our basement here at home, much like many people obviously do now with telecommuting, but that's worked out well since we do have children to make it all work so I can continue to serve in Congress. I have a lot of deep roots in the Cedar Valley. If any of you were familiar with Hinson Manufacturing Products, that was my grandparents' company. So very proud legacy of manufacturing and employment in the Cedar Valley for many decades. And they've been long gone, but I think their mark still stands in many places. And I'm very proud of a lot of the philanthropic work that my grandparents did in the community as well. But yeah, my dad grew up in Waterloo, went to Orange, my husband went to West. So a lot of family history in the area, but great to be with you. Great to be back home in Iowa. I always say I'm always so excited to get on a plane back home so I can see my husband, Matt, and my kids, Max and Jax. I just wanted to kind of go back. We had obviously that meeting just a few weeks ago, really enjoyed hearing the updates about a lot of the projects that are happening from Mayor Hart and obviously Rob in Cedar Falls as well. I look forward to more updates from you as well as we have our conversation today. So actually after our last meeting, I went straight up to Waterloo, was able to meet with Mayor Hart to continue the conversation that we had over Zoom that morning about community projects in the area. We specifically talked about that day, the need for investment in downtown areas. I also met with members of the Black Hawk Child Care Coalition. They're clearly dedicated to increasing affordable quality childcare options for Iowans, especially in rural areas. It's been a priority issue for me in working with working families here in Iowa. They've dealt with it for years, and one of the top issues that I have been hearing about from businesses and families alike right now, how do we provide that option in an affordable and accessible way? I was also able to visit the Waterloo Career Center to learn more about the work-based learning programs that they are offering to students in the community. We're doing it right here in Iowa, and it's a great story that I tell frequently in Washington, D.C. When you look at our specialty training programs that we're able to offer here, we're connecting students with those good and right opportunities to allow them to succeed, and then most importantly, to allow them to get that high-paying job after graduation as well. So both childcare access and workforce development are legislative priorities for me in Congress right now. Have another few quick updates that I wanted to pass along on my work in Congress so far, just so that you could be aware of those. It was really important to me. I know I'm in the business of customer service, so I wanted to make sure our offices were up and running on day one. And we do have offices in Waterloo, Cedar Rapids, and Dubuque, as well as our DC team. Many of you probably have interacted with our teams at this point already, but if you haven't, our DC team is primarily focused on the legislative arm. We're introducing a lot of legislation. I think I'm coming up, they told me yesterday, on probably 200 bills, either introduced individually or co-sponsored, and I'm proud of that work. But again, our district team is really that first stop for casework. Working with the IRS, we've already returned $55,000 to Iowa taxpayers through our work in advocacy with the IRS. But anyway, we're all working hard to deliver for you in Washington, D.C. and back home in the district. Committee work is starting to kind of get into full swing. We've been having a lot of hearings in Washington. I serve Iowans both on the House Appropriations Committee and the House Budget Committee. I'm the only Iowan on the Appropriations Committee, so I think that speaks volumes about Iowa having a voice in the appropriations process. I think it's crucial to have a seat at the table throughout the entire federal budgeting and spending process. The government is obviously spending a lot of your money. So I'm very cognizant of that. For me, really, a lot of my work has been pushing back on the policies and the proposals that I see as being potentially harmful for our communities, but also coming together to find common ground whenever that's possible. I think that's a mandate that you all have given me in going to Washington. And I've really tried to focus on getting input from Iowans on what matters to them, what's working, what you're concerned about, how I can deliver solutions for you. I think we'll see that coming out of our legislative shop. One issue that I'm hearing a lot about from our business community, not only in the Cedar Valley, but across the district right now, is just the severe worker shortage. I've heard from businesses across our district who have those help wanted signs on their doors, but can't find workers to fill the open jobs. Some are offering, up to $10 an hour more than they were paying for the same position, which is incredible, and still not getting the workers. And I believe that is largely because the government has been paying people to stay home instead of going to work, which just discourages people from applying to open jobs. I do respect the governor, and I'm glad that she did make that decision to end Iowa's participation in the additional federal unemployment pandemic benefit programs. We have more jobs available than unemployed people right now, and anyone who wants a vaccine can get one. I got my vaccine, and I'm trying to lead by example there to show people I believe it's safe. So we need to have policies in place that encourage more people to get back to work, so that our economy can get back on track and we can see a return to normal life. When we're seeing inflation right now rear its ugly head, not only what people are paying at the pump, what they're paying at the grocery, what they're paying for lumber, for example. It's a challenge our country is going to have to face, and I've been sounding the alarm on that for several months with all of the spending and the money that's been going into the market. So ensuring that we have those policies in place, standing against the policies that will hurt our chances of economic growth, is a priority for me in Congress. I fought against the $15 minimum wage mandate from the federal government. I heard time and time again that would decimate our small business community here in Iowa. And then I did vote against huge spending packages that, again, predictably caused the largest inflation we've seen in more than a decade. The government seems to think it can print money, and I wish the federal government operated more like the state of Iowa does, where it doesn't spend more than it takes in. I think that's very important. So I'm very cognizant of the specific issues that our business community is facing as we work to reopen the economy. I've heard from multiple businesses in the area who had issues with the Shuttered Venues Operators Grant Program. I wrote a letter to the SBA requesting several fixes to that program so that more small businesses in our district could access the resources they need to be able to keep their doors open. A couple of other legislative highlights that happened through letter writing, which I think is really important. Not everything happens on the floor of the House. We wrote to the FAA commissioner because they had put a stop to their engineers traveling, yet the American people were able to get on a plane safely. That was holding up projects at the Cedar Rapids Airport, the Eastern Iowa Airport, and the Dubuque Airport. That affects contractors' bottom line. They've made those decisions and purchased, in some cases, extra equipment and hired workers. And so I wrote a letter to the FAA administrator and DOT Secretary Buttigieg, and they agreed and made sure that those engineers could then get to our smaller regional airports. Another win that I think was helpful, our Farm Service Agency offices were operating at a very limited capacity. I was hearing from farmers throughout the district that it was an issue. They weren't getting the service that they need. So I wrote to Secretary Vilsack, who I've had a call with as well, and was able to get that capacity increased as well so that we could best serve our ag community through Eastern Iowa. So not everything happens through a bill, but I think we're finding success in serving you in Washington, D.C. And it's a true honor to work for you and hear from you. And I look forward to your questions today.
Thank you very much. Great update. Appreciate it. As I said, pretty simple format. We're at question time now, so let's see. If you have anything specific, Cara, do you want to start?
Yes, let me unmute myself. Good morning, all, and good morning, Congresswoman. It's good to see you in person.
Good morning.
As you were talking about growing the economy, I just wanted to bring to your attention again the need for legislation to pass before September 30th to reauthorize Silos and Smokestacks National Heritage Area. I serve as Executive Director of Silos and Smokestacks. There's many rural communities that rely on us for their tourism, their promotion, technical assistance, trainings, and other supports. And just a reminder from our economic impact report, the heritage area brings over 3 million visitors to the region annually. Of course, that didn't happen last year in the pandemic, so a lot of those small places in the rural communities were really hit with lack of tourism dollars. We also generate over 309 million in economic activity in the region, which is significant for those places. And we generate over 80 million in state and federal tax revenue as well. So we do definitely have a large economic impact, very positive one in the area. And we would not want to lose that. If we're not reauthorized by 9/30, we will no longer exist. And so, especially at this critical juncture with coming out of the pandemic and people really needing to boost their economies through these tourisms and folks going to these sites. So whatever you can do to help move along that reauthorization would be greatly appreciated. I know there's bills in the House already, but it just, as needless to say, it's only 4 months away and we're getting very nervous.
Yeah.
So anything you can do to help with that, I would
Completely
really
understood. Yes. And I know you're not alone. A lot of people are getting nervous about that deadline at the end of September. So
Yeah.
we are watching it. My deputy chief of staff is on this call today as well. So she's now aware of it as well. And just wanted to let you know, just for anybody on the call, if you engage with our office, we're happy to help flag additional grant opportunities as well. That's something we've done a lot. We can write letters of support for those opportunities. Don't be afraid to ask us to do that.
Okay, great.
Because it does help, obviously, coming from a member of the Appropriations Committee to ask support for grant. We just as a general policy on our committee, we don't write letters of support for appropriations requests other than the requests that we individually submit. But for grants and other programs, we do write letters. So just don't be afraid to reach out to our office and ask us for that. We're happy to help.
That's great to know. This reauthorization really doesn't affect, well, it affects money in the sense that we would no longer be able to get anything.
Right.
So, for us, those are kind of two different issues. The reauthorization needs to happen. And then, of course,
and then the
appropriations. Yeah. So,
yeah, I think Congress frequently, the basic job of Congress in my mind is to create and authorize programs, fund those programs, and then oversee them. And usually we fail at 2 out of the 3. So I'm trying to make sure that we are moving in the right direction, but that's a great flag. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Let's see, who's next? Noel, did you want to say something? Are you going to ask a question? Noel Anderson.
Hi, this is Noel Anderson. I'm the Community Planning and Development Director for the City of Waterloo. And I do have Jamie Knutson, our city engineer, on here. Obviously, we want to hopefully see some continued support for infrastructure improvements. And Jamie's going to go through a real brief description of a project we have here that we've been trying to prioritize.
Awesome.
Good morning, Congresswoman. Jamie Knutson, city engineer for Waterloo. Just real briefly, one of the projects that we're working on is trying to tie our new $100 million theme park, our water park, and our casino into our Crossroads area. We've received some federal funding for this project. Obviously, we're always looking for more. And one of the questions that I wanted to ask you specifically, I guess, on this call was the definition of infrastructure. I'm seeing a lot of things coming out that seems like that definition is being stretched from what it used to be as far as what true infrastructure is: water, roads, bridges, those kinds of things. Can you maybe give us a little update on how that definition is looking right now, or what you're hearing from your perspective?
Yeah, well, and I think that's the main the main difference between right now the plan being presented by Democrats in Congress and the plan being alternate plan being presented by Republicans. I think what you'll see coming out of the Republican conference is a targeted infrastructure plan that is focused on what you would consider to be the traditional definition of infrastructure: roads and bridges, locks and dams. And in this case, I think broadband does fit into that because it is a physical infrastructure. So I think my biggest concern with the proposal that we saw come out was, and I mean, I worked on legislation as a state representative to help support our electric vehicle industry. I realize that's the way we're moving. I also understand that our combustion engines are going to be on the road for a long time too. You know, I think we do need to be looking forward, but at the same time, when I'm seeing huge subsidies for electric vehicle charging stations, when we need the money for roads and bridges, I just think that's a little short-sighted and we need to reprioritize. So our plan is a skinnier plan. I think it's 400 billion, if I'm remembering correctly, compared to the trillions and trillions of dollars we're seeing proposed. That includes other things that are not what I would call typically infrastructure. So I'm hopeful we can meet in the middle. I'm realistic about that. You know, they're not going to probably come all the way down to our end, and we're not going to go all the way up to their end. But I'm hopeful we'll be able to meet in the middle because I know it's really important. I'm trying to prioritize several infrastructure projects through my community project funding requests that I did for the Appropriations Committee. We could only submit 10, so it was kind of, we had to really be narrow on our discretion there. But I did submit one for a lock and dam project, NASP, on the Mississippi River. I understand that modernization is key. So I'm ready to support what you would call the hard infrastructure and the traditional definition of infrastructure.
Thank you. That's good to hear.
Thank you, Jamie.
Yeah.
Steve, Kevin, can I
Yes,
follow
sir.
up on that?
Please.
Hi, Congressman Kevin Blanchard with Intercog, 6 counties, and we serve the MPO Waterloo, Cedar Falls. I just kind of wanted to follow up on the infrastructure discussion. Obviously, we support an infrastructure bill, but we also on a transportation side, I think we would support, or I would support, and I hope everyone would, a more robust reauthorization of the transportation bill.
Mm-hmm.
And that those mechanisms for planning and programming are in place. And if more funding were provided for that, I think that would solve quite a few of our transportation needs. Not all of them. We always take more money, although I agree with you. It's sometimes kind of hard to get our head around all this. But when it comes around to reauthorizing the FAST Act, I think that is one mechanism, a 5-6 year bill that we've already planned for, we've already programmed for, is a good way to handle that transportation shortage and funding.
Yeah.
The other,
and I would say Transportation Infrastructure Committee, I'm on the appropriations side with THUD, but the Transportation Infrastructure Committee is kind of fighting over the reauthorization right now. So we'll keep an eye on that, but just so you know, that's kind of where it stands in the
Okay,
policy committee
great.
side.
And one of the other needs that we have in our region, when we serve 6 counties and 55 cities, is water and sewer.
Mm-hmm.
We have small communities of 100 to 200 population that have they have edicts to get their pollution control plants fixed that are $2 million, and that's a real challenge. So we would support anything in relation to water and sewer. And my final plug will be, as a board member, to follow up on Cara's discussion about reauthorization for silos and smokestacks. That's definitely high on our list. So
Awesome.
Thank you for the opportunity to meet with us today.
Yeah, well, one thing that I think it seemed to work well for flood infrastructure. I worked on this at the state level, but I'm looking to see if there's a nexus at the federal level. But specifically, you know, I realize these projects are super expensive and you're going to bond for them to pay for them in most cases. And so is there a way where we can allow longer bonding time? Because the life of these projects is obviously a very long time. So that's one thing that we realized with flood infrastructure. And we made it a very narrow definition. But if you had a project that had been approved by the Flood Mitigation Board, you could bond out to 30 years instead of 20, right? Which is, it spreads the life of the project cost over more people, which makes sense. I mean, the lives of these projects are longer. Many people are going to utilize the benefit from them. So that's something that I think I would be open to looking at for water to help pay for that. I mean, in terms of the flexibility that you might need to finance that as well. So, but happy to engage on that going forward, because it's not the first time I've heard it, as you can imagine. And I think I was in, I want to say New Albany, which you talk about the smallest of small towns in the district, and they have water pipes that are very decades and decades and decades old that need replaced. So so I'm cognizant of that issue, and I'm open to working on some solutions for it too.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Who would like to go next?
Hey, Kevin, if you don't mind.
No, sure, go ahead, Ron.
Hi, Congresswoman. My name's Ron Gaines. I am the city administrator for the city of Cedar Falls. And so it was I don't know, a month or two ago, we had the opportunity to present a number of projects to your staff, along with Senator Grassley and Senator Ernst's staffs. And one of the projects that we have in Cedar Falls is Iowa Highway 58 and Green Hill Road intersection. And part of the reason that we have that and we're looking at moving that forward is it's one of the most dangerous intersections in the state of Iowa, with high-speed crashes that are looking at severe injuries and fatalities. And so trying to figure out how to pay for what we're looking at about a $36 million project is starting to get to be a little bit difficult, especially it's primarily an Iowa DOT roadway. We're actually had a great meeting with senior members of the Iowa DOT staff yesterday and trying to figure out how to move this project forward. Some of that may depend on what happens at the federal level, as Kevin had mentioned, with regard to some of the transportation reauthorization, and maybe even looking at the RISE or RAISE grant. So hopefully we can continue up with your staff a little bit more and get support for you with maybe some of those grant applications or other authorizations.
No, I appreciate that. And I think one of the things Brittany had flagged for me was that because we were looking obviously at what qualified for a community project funding request versus what needs a general appropriation, or as you mentioned, maybe through a state DOT. I have a good relationship with Director Marler and Michael Derby, who's obviously their federal lobbyist as well. So we're happy to engage. So just let us know as those conversations continue, and then we'll keep an eye on it too with the highway bill.
Thank you. We'll probably be following up with your staff shortly. So thank you.
Great. Yep. No, thank you.
Who would like to go next?
I do. I have a, well,
Sure.
It's more of a comment.
Hey, Barb.
How are you?
Good.
This is more of a comment. I want to, the federal government really stepped in the last year and helped food banks fight food insecurity. The good news is that in the last month or so, with the addition of the additional funding for SNAP, the additional stimulus money, the numbers of people we're seeing has gone down, which is great. Anticipating that the summer might not do so well, but we're prepared, at least we're prepared to handle it. I just want to make sure that going forward, we continue to have strong nutrition programs through child nutrition, through the Farm Bill, through all of the programs that help us do our job better, but also help shrink that meal gap that we're trying to close that's still there. And appreciate the support your office has given us to date, and just a continuing strong partnership moving forward.
I appreciate
so thank
that.
you.
Nope. Thanks, Barb.
Don't be bashful. This is a great opportunity we have before us this morning.
Steve, I have a question.
Go ahead.
Mike Hulme. Good morning, Congresswoman. My name is Mike Hulme. I'm a business owner and financial advisor. And I'd like to maybe turn the tables just a little bit to a different topic and have you expound on your thoughts related to a balanced budget. I think there are many of us that feel both parties have failed in this area. and are even more worried because some might be more emboldened after all the spending that has occurred due to the pandemic. As you pointed out earlier, the Federal Reserve now has regularly been digitally printing hundreds of billions of dollars, buying treasury debt from the deficit spending. I know I observed too, even with the presidential campaign, it struck me how seldom the topic of a balanced budget was even brought up in conversation in the debates or by either party. As I talk to others, I think a lot of us are sharing concerns of not only the near and medium term risk, but that it's our grandchildren who will be suffering the consequences of this negligence. So what's the atmosphere in DC about anybody having the courage to tackle this problem?
Well, the first thing I would say is RSC, which I'm a member of. It's a caucus, Republican Study Committee. We actually just put out a budget this week. There are things in there that I don't like. And I think not everybody's happy with the proposal, but it's something to start the conversation. So we put that out this week. So we are willing to have a conversation and present a budget. The budget committee, that's its role, right, is to actually present a budget. And there hasn't been a budget proposed out of the budget committee, and I am not optimistic that we'll see one under the current leadership. The RSC budget does balance the budget. I believe it's within 5 years. It makes some really tough decisions, but it's a starting point for conversation. So I think you'll see that Republicans in the conference are ready to come to the table and have those discussions, serious discussions about funding programs, and then also eliminating programs that are wasteful. So that's something, and it also incorporates several of my bills, including I have what's called the Red Tape Reduction Act, which reduces regulations, and it requires congressional oversight on regulations. One of the biggest costs, as you know, of doing business is when the government decides to get involved. So I think it's really important to do that. Another thing that I think is important, I addressed, it's in the budget, not really related to the budget, but it's in our proposal, but dealing with childcare. So my bill to look at the regulations surrounding childcare and why it's so expensive. I think that could also impact some of the subsidies that are going out for childcare, right? So we're having those conversations and we're trying to be serious about it because it is a problem. And, you know, I'm realistic. My kids are 10 and 8. And you know, I look at what I'm doing now and how important it's going to be to what happens when they're 70. You know, I mean, it's going to be a long-term decision-making process here. So we've presented a conversation starter is what I would say this week. And I think we're ready to come to the table on it. As a financial advisor, you obviously understand the importance of, you know, Social Security and income. As people are trying to balance their investment income with, you know, the guarantee from the government. In 2021, this is going to be the first year we're putting out more than we're taking in. I mean, and that's really concerning to me. And so long term, if we're not serious about that, it's going to be my kids that are paying for it. And I know that.
Thank you. And I'm glad that's on your radar too, because there have been several bipartisan commissions that have very viable solutions for Social Security. It's just my impression is that politically it's too much of a hot button for candidates.
I can tell you what the ads will be against me next year, right? I mean, that's the thing. It's like it's too bad that it ends up being a political hot button because it's ultimately somebody's got to make a tough decision, and that's what's really challenging, I think. But that's the environment that we're in, but I'm ready to come to the table because I think it's important.
Well, thank you for your service. Keep trying.
Yep. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. I keep looking.
I'll jump in, Steve.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Kate.
Hi, Kate England with the Community Foundation of Northeast Iowa. Good to see you again, Representative Hinson.
Yep.
And I just want to share with you some exciting news for the Cedar Valley. Many of you know that for the last 3 years, a big group of individuals have been meeting since Future Ready Iowa meeting 3 years ago about solutions for our community around connecting people to employment solutions and taking down barriers that many of them we've discussed already this morning. And we have a 3-hour launching strategic plan meeting today with about, like I said, 20 individuals from our community. We've hired a contractor to begin doing our work. And we're using the model of the Center for Working Families based out of the Evelyn K. Davis Center in Des Moines uses that model. So again, just extremely excited about that for our community, and certainly we'll be looking to many community members and certainly your support as well on how we can move forward with these strategies.
All right, thank you. No, that's a good highlight, and I'm always excited to hear what good work's coming out of Future Ready Iowa, because it's just it was a great impetus to get a lot of things moving.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Steve, if I may add on here, good morning again, Congresswoman. Awesome to see you again as well. We know through Future Ready Iowa that we have to have an additional 140,000 Iowans with some form of training and education beyond high school to be competitive for the dynamic and knowledge-based economy that we're growing here in the state. And one of the key areas that we know is in the field of preparing educators, of course, preparing tradespeople, and helping to address some of the barriers that in particular, low-income first-generation individuals face. Mm-hmm. And so you and I and a host of many of the members on this call, we have support and leadership from Gross Cedar Valley, but also Cedar Falls, Waterloo Schools, City of Waverly, the AEA in our area, and a number of other folks have actually gotten together to envision what are the ways in which government, industry, and the education sector can synergize in solving the workforce needs for the educator workforce, for the trades in our area, for the technical expertise that we need in our economy. And so we haven't had a chance to talk about this as a coalition with you, but we really look forward to it. It's a proposal called Fired Up. And we're excited because it bridges, like I said, the industry education sector together in making use of existing government programs and improving those programs to be more effective at addressing those areas. And just wanted to kind of flag it for additional conversation in the future, but really I look forward to having an additional conversation with you about it as a team. So.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. And just a couple of things that I would flag that we have tried to work on to kind of supplement what you're talking about with additional training. We have the Jobs Act that I introduced that expands Pell Grant opportunities. And then, I'm trying to specifically target to areas that, we need obviously more of in Iowa. OB and midwife is an important area that I've been trying to focus on as far as training. So I just introduced a couple bills this week that will help provide that access and training for midwifery, but using existing programs, expanding those. So we're on board with trying to make sure we're providing those opportunities and training opportunities, because ultimately that gets people to come to Iowa, but it also keeps them here, which I know is a priority for you as well. And yeah, based on our conversation last week. So
yeah, you bet. Yeah. And also Hawkeye Community College has been a really strong partner in this work as well. And I want to lift them up on this as well.
Yep, absolutely.
Yep. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
I'm scanning.
Steve, I'll jump in if you don't mind.
Sure,
please. Good morning, Congresswoman. Travis Toliver. I'm the Executive Director for the Waverly Chamber of Commerce and Main Street Program. First, just thank you for your service. Really appreciate what you're doing in Washington. I just wanted to say that I had a great interaction with one of your staff members a couple weeks back. Christina came up to Waverly to just find out what was going on with our businesses. I had a pleasure of walking up and down our main street and introducing her to some of our small businesses, and just really appreciated that exposure for your staff. So just wanted to extend a warm welcome to you in Waverly whenever you get the opportunity to come up. But really enjoyed interacting with Christina and looking forward to maybe possibly a future tour with you soon.
Absolutely. No, and I know I walked the main street last fall. I think it was, the mural was just being painted, I believe, when I was there on the wall. So I'll have to come back and see it now that it's probably done.
It's getting close, but yeah, we'd love to have you back.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I'm going to follow that up, Travis, with another shout out for Christina. She's done a great job of connecting with us here in the Cedar Valley and trying to both offer assistance and, you know, by extension, sort of offer your ear to us. And we really appreciate that. So thank you, Christina.
Yeah. I have the best staff. I always say that, and I don't want their heads to get too big, but yeah, obviously Christina, Sam, our district director, we've got great team in Dubuque. And then, you know, with Jimmy, my chief of staff, who many of you probably met last year through the campaign cycle, but he is my chief of staff now in DC too. And then Brittany's on as well from my office. So we've got just a great team trying to make sure that we serve you in the best way.
No, thank you.
Steve is
Yeah. Go ahead, Chris.
Hi, Congresswoman Kris Hansen.
Yeah. Okay. Good morning.
Good morning. Western Home Communities up here in Cedar Falls, and then we're around Northeast Iowa. I just need to take the opportunity to really thank you for all the support over the last year during the pandemic. You know, the provider relief funds and the PPP loans and stretching that out to the nonprofit side as well was pretty critical. Was critical to getting us through this. You know, a couple things. One, I really appreciate your concern about the regulatory reach. I got a feeling that folks don't quite understand the whole reimbursement methodology around Medicaid and the lack of appropriate funding. And then to think that long-term care facilities were going to be able to step in to, you know, really be mini hospitals to try to help this with the throughput. We did what we could. I just got a feeling that with the new administration, that pendulum's going to swing back pretty hard. And I would, you know, encourage you to resist that a little bit. The other thing is those provider relief funds funded a lot of PPE and, you know, wages and testing and everything. A lot of that has not stopped. It's certainly been reduced, but it continues on in the nursing facilities and the assisted living facilities. But the provider relief funding has stopped. I think there's still, you know, some money in the CARES Act. I'm with Mike. I'm not asking for, you know, to keep dipping in, but at the same time, pandemic and emergent situation call for pretty drastic measures. But if there were a way to, you know, allocate some of that remaining funding to continue to fund us, because the challenge is when that stops, those costs continue. We don't have a lot of places to go to offset that other than to charge the private pay individuals more. So, you know, the state and federal government out to be stepping up to help cover some of those costs. So I would just raise that up to you. And of course, the workforce challenges. We are all in on childcare. There'll be a nice announcement next week around that, and trying to do some more things in the Cedar Valley with great partners. But there's just a lot of challenges to get people back into the workforce, let alone just the burnout that the pandemic has caused specifically to healthcare workers. It's been a burnout for everybody. So anyway, whatever support you can continue to help us with there. I know I'll be in to meet with you in person in July with the Iowa Healthcare Association. I'm looking forward to that because we haven't really had an opportunity to spend time together. Certainly would welcome me up to tour anytime. But just my main thing is thank you so much for all the effort last year.
No, I appreciate that. And the CMS reimbursement is definitely top of mind for us in our office. So we're working with the committee to try to make sure that we kind of get a better feel for how some of that may play out. So that's a good flag, but we're aware of it and we're working on it. So continue to communicate with our office about that. And then I know with the provider relief funding, some of the challenges with that, I met with Mercy One last week as well. And heard that from them. So that's something that definitely has been echoed several times as well. So no, thank you for all of you done to help weather the storm in the last year, because obviously getting through that pandemic this pandemic, we're still in it kind of, but has been so challenging for so many, and the healthcare worker burnout, I know it's a real thing. So I appreciate all that you're doing too.
Well, one last thing, I've spent a lot of time in DC over the last 20 years. And so anything, and been called on quite a number of times. So anything that I can do to help you understand Medicaid, Medicare, or your staff, I'm not saying I know more. I'm just saying whatever I can do to help and be a resource, happy to do it.
No, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris. Other thoughts? Other questions?
Hi, Representative Hinson, Randy Pilkington from UNI. I'm going to take a little different spin here. I know you had some really important visitors last week to visit you, but many of us were used to coming to DC quite a bit and probably will start doing that more. Can you give us a sense of what it's like now? How do you visit your office and other offices, and what's going to be necessary as we kind of make that transition and start to move toward those trips again?
Yeah, well, I know we can go through, actually Brittany's on. I'm going to let her take that because she understands the process a little bit. So Brittany, if you want to pop on.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Congresswoman. I think it's a really important question. Obviously, we would love to have visitors come in. I think Andrew was our first official visitor that we were able to get in through all of the weird new protocols. The good news is that the security protocols have changed, and so for the security side of things, we're able to accept most types of visitors at this point. The COVID protocols are still partially in place. We are subject to the speaker's decisions on that. Unfortunately, it's not something that the Congresswoman can just completely decide on her own. The Speaker of the House, Speaker Pelosi, basically has control over how many people we can let in the building and whether or not those meetings can happen in person and to what extent. So for the next few months, we're certainly happy to try. I would put a very big caveat on that any meetings that are coming in, if we're able to manage them in person, we are encouraged by the attending physician not to have individuals from, for example, rare disease groups. I know in the healthcare space, and I'm sure Kris can appreciate this, a lot of individuals want to come in and meet directly to speak about a rare disease. The attending physician is encouraging us not to take in-person meetings, for example, with people who are immunocompromised in person, just because of the nature of these buildings where you have people coming in and flying in from all over the place, even just the members of Congress themselves. And then the other big flag is we don't have the infrastructure to socially distance large groups. And so any meetings would need to be really small. If they were in person, 1 or 2 people, maybe 3 people maximum, just because we don't have the space to physically distance. And we're currently under this sort of weird regulatory scheme from the Speaker and the attending physician right now, where if we don't have a space, we shouldn't be taking larger meetings. So we're in this little bit of like a holding pattern right now. We don't even have interns right now because we don't have the ability to have them physically present in our office, but we're working on it. And I would always say err on the side of asking, but give us a little grace if we have to say no for something that's out of our control.
What type of time frame do you think, Brittany, that's going to continue? I mean,
yeah,
we obviously made a lot of progress, but we also still obviously are in a pandemic.
Yeah, I think it's something that I wish I had an answer for, but we just don't. We've asked that question of the Speaker's office a couple of times. To give you a little context here, 75+% of members are vaccinated. Most of the staff is vaccinated. I know the Congresswoman's already mentioned that she's vaccinated, as are we. Even in that scenario, they are not allowing all members of Congress on the floor at the same time to vote in limited blocks. And so I think that will be a good indicator of when the rest of the protocols will start changing. As soon as members are able to go about their normal business, the Congresswoman is not meeting in committee rooms, she's meeting in committees virtually right now. So I think those things are probably going to be the first to change. And then once those change, we'll more likely see a more rapid progression toward normalcy for meetings. But I mean, I'm also just giving you hypotheticals here. So we're doing the best we can with really limited access to information ourselves.
Well, we appreciate it. It's a tough time for everybody. I see Eric is talking. He's on mute.
Sorry, Steve, I was talking to somebody else here at home.
No problem. No problem. Didn't know if he had a question or what.
Morning, Senator. How are you?
I'm good, Representative Hinson. Good to see you again.
Yeah, I bet your relief session's done this year. I was
Absolutely.
watching.
You know how that goes.
Yes.
Other questions? Well, I don't see anybody. So I'm going to ask a final question. I kind of alluded to this earlier, but I know just from talking to your predecessors over the years that those first few days and weeks, even before the actual session starts, but just kind of, the orientation sessions, so on and so forth, create lots of what a couple of them have called pinch me moments. Just, I can't believe that I'm standing here doing this or doing that. Share a couple of those with us if you would.
Yeah, I think probably the coolest moment was, and nothing's been normal about this start to Congress because we've been in the middle of a pandemic. I mean, even our swearing in day, they were supposed to swear in the freshmen on the floor by ourselves. And then because procedural motions were happening, a lot of members were on, it was like mass chaos. And then they ended up swearing in a bunch of us at the same time. So it was odd how that all played out just because of the pandemic protocols. But I think the coolest moment for me was when we got into DC on December 31st. My kids wanted to come in early because my youngest son's birthday is January 1st, and he wanted to be at the Lincoln Memorial on his birthday. That's what he said he wanted. And so we came in early, and I just had my, badge that said I'm a member elect. And I went up to the Capitol Police and I said, hey, I'm new. I'm the new kid on the block. I would love to bring my family in so I could show them around. And they let us go in. And so my kids and I and my husband were standing in the Capitol Rotunda by ourselves. And it was just quite a meaningful moment because we're looking around at all the history. You think about all the people who've served in that building, the incredible things that have happened for our country in that building. And it was a pinch me moment. And it was very cool for my kids to see because I think that they understand also what I'm doing there and how important that is. And so yeah, that was, I think, probably the coolest, most meaningful moment of what I've experienced. And I've had some amazing experiences. I was one of the members who was allowed to go into the presidential address to Congress a few weeks ago. There were not that many of us in the room. And I think that was a historic occasion. And then it's been a wild ride, but I feel like we're getting a lot of really good things done for the district, and that's what makes me proud. And I have the best staff. I mentioned Brittany, and obviously Christina's on the call. Zach's on the call as well. I've got Carly in the office. I mean, we've just got such great staff. So I would just say, again, thank you for the opportunity to serve you. Please sign up for our newsletter if you don't already get that. We send that out once a week as well. So would love to get your feedback on what we're working on. But yeah, it's just been an incredible experience, and it's an honor to serve you.
Well, thank you. And we appreciate your service to the Cedar Valley, as well as the whole district, as well as the state. And we'll continue to follow and look for good things to come. So thank you again. And thank all of you for being with us as well this morning. Before I turn it back over to Carrie, I just would mention that on June 11th, which will be our next Friday forum, we'll have a recap of the legislative session. Right now we're planning to have Dustin Miller, who's been with us before as the executive director of the Iowa Chamber Alliance, come and sort of give us a recap from the business viewpoint as to what happened with the legislative session this year. So with that, Carrie, back to you.
Sure, and quickly, thank you, Steve. Good job. This has been great information and a great update, and certainly great introduction for those of you who haven't met Congresswoman Hinson yet. So thank you for joining us and your staff. Again, I want to echo that Christine has just been a real trooper. She attends all of our monthly meetings, and we've really enjoyed getting to know her and getting to know you through her. So again, thanks all of you on behalf of Grow Cedar Valley for joining us today. We'll see you, if we don't see you in between, we'll see you next month when we get a recap of this year's Iowa legislative session. Take care, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
You.